People say revenge is a dish best served cold, but no one talks about how satisfying it is when it comes with a lake view and a deed in your name. I'm Rachel Hale. I'm 36, single, no kids, and I run my own boutique design studio. I've never fit the mold my family built for me, and I stopped trying a long time ago. But this time, they crossed a line I couldn't ignore, and it all started with a group text I wasn't supposed to see. It was a Tuesday night, and I was elbows deep in a client's mood board when my phone buzzed. I glanced over and saw a message from my sister, Julia, accidentally sent to me instead of just the rest of the family group. So glad Rachel isn't coming, this trip will be way less tense without her. For a second, I thought maybe it was a joke. Then I scrolled up, there it was. A vacation plan, flights, Airbnb, rental cars, all booked. My 2 brothers, their wives, Julia, her husband, even our parents. A full-blown family getaway to Lake Crescent. No one had told me. No one had invited me. And now I knew why, but what stung most was that no one even bothered to pretend I'd be missed. Lake Crescent wasn't just any vacation spot, it was where we spent every summer growing up. Cannonball contests, burnt marshmallows, the one place we'd all gotten along, at least back then. I had photos of us at the lake, arms linked, muddy and smiling. Now, they were going without me. I sat there for a long time, staring at that message, wondering what I ever did that was so unforgivable. The thing is, I've always been indifferent. I chose career over marriage, tattoos over church, and therapy over family gossip. I thought carving my own path would earn respect. Instead, it made me a topic of whispered conversations and passive-aggressive comments at Thanksgiving. But this wasn't just a snub, it was an erasure. And I wasn't going to let it slide. That night, I didn't cry. I opened Zillow. I typed in Lake Crescent, waterfront properties. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, a distraction, an escape, closure. Then I saw it, a listing for a small, but stunning A-frame cottage, next door to the rental house my family had booked. I toured it virtually, then called the agent at 8 a.m. The seller was motivated. It had been on the market for months. I made an offer before I finished my morning coffee. By noon, it was accepted. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friend. I wanted to keep the surprise. Exactly that. The day my family arrived at Lake Crescent, I waited. I watched from the porch of my new home, a pair of mirrored sunglasses hiding my grin. They pulled up in SUVs, laughter spilling from the open windows. Julia stepped out first. She was wearing the same lake hoodie I had 10 years ago. She didn't notice me until I waved. It was like watching a glitch in a simulation. First came confusion, then disbelief. Then Julia's face twisted into something close to panic. My mother blinked hard. My father muttered, "Is that Rachel?" I waved again, this time with my keys dangling from my fingers. They still didn't understand what I was doing there. Not yet. When Julia finally crossed the property line, I greeted her with a hug. She didn't return. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Oh," I said casually, "I bought this place." She looked past me at the house, the dock, the kayaks. "You what?" I let the silence stretch. Then I smiled. "I'm your new neighbor." The first few days were awkward, at least for them. I made small talk when I passed them on walks. I offered sunscreen at the beach. I roasted my own marshmallows 2 feet from their bonfire. They avoided eye contact. My mother tried to pretend it was fine, but I knew it wasn't, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely, delightfully in control. On the 4th night, my eldest brother knocked on my door. "We didn't mean to hurt you," he said, eyes flicking down. "It just didn't feel like you wanted to come." I stared at him. "I didn't get the chance to want anything," I replied. Then I asked a question I knew he couldn't answer. "Would you have even told me if Julia hadn't messed up the text?" He shifted, uncomfortable. "We thought you were busy." "You always are." I laughed, sharp, bitter. "That's not an excuse. That's an excuse you made up to feel better about excluding me." His silence was the loudest thing I'd heard all week, and in that silence, something inside me clicked. I stopped trying after that. Not in a petty way, but in a peaceful one. I kayaked alone at sunrise. I painted watercolors on my back deck. I read books I'd been saving for years. And for the first time in forever, I wasn't performing. I wasn't hoping for approval. I was just living, and that quiet happiness? It was louder than any apology. 2 days before they were scheduled to leave, something shifted. My mother knocked on the door. She had tears in her eyes. "I miss you," she said. "I didn't realize how much until I saw you here." I let her in. We talked for hours. She admitted she hadn't fought for me, and I told her, gently, that I had finally stopped fighting. On their last night, Julia left something in my mailbox. A handwritten note. You were right, it said. You didn't deserve that. I was jealous you built your life your way. I read it twice, then put it in the back of my favorite book. Not for keepsakes, but for closure. Some chapters don't need rewriting. Just ending. I didn't go back to the city. I turned the cottage into my main home. Clients didn't care where I zoomed from. I redesigned the interior myself, every pillow, every frame, every hue. This place wasn't just a statement. It was a sanctuary, and slowly, without trying, I built a new kind of family around me. That summer, I started hosting art workshops for local teens, weekend bonfires for friends, book clubs. I became the neighbor who always had wine, blankets, and too many candles. People didn't know my family drama. They just knew me as Rachel, the woman who smiled a lot and always had the good snacks. And that version of me? She was finally home. It's funny. Buying the house next door wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming a place I loved, on my own terms. It was about proving, to them and to myself, that I didn't need an invitation to belong. I could build my own space, my own peace, my own joy, and I didn't need anyone else's permission to do it. Every now and then, my family visits the lake again. Sometimes, we talk. Sometimes, we don't. And that's okay. I wave. I smile. But I no longer bend or shrink. I no longer chase or wait, because I live next door, but I don't live for them. That winter, I didn't fly back home for Christmas. I didn't feel guilty about it either. Instead, I decorated the cottage in pine garlands, invited a few friends from town, and hosted a quiet holiday dinner. We drank mulled wine by the fire, played card games late into the night, and passed around homemade dessert trays. There were no expectations, no forced smiles, just real joy, shared freely. In January, something rare happened. Lake Crescent froze at the surface. I bundled up in layers, grabbed my camera, and stepped outside to capture the silence. As I stood on the snow-dusted dock, I heard crunching behind me. My younger brother, Aaron, approached with hesitant footsteps. He didn't say hello. He just stood next to me, gazing out over the glassy ice. I didn't know how much we were hurting you, he said finally. I guess, we thought you didn't care. I took a deep breath, watching our reflections in the water. That's the thing, I said. You decided that for me. You never asked. He nodded. You're right. And that quiet acknowledgement? It felt more healing than 1,000 sorries. We didn't become best friends overnight. But that conversation with Aaron cracked something open. Slowly, a few more texts came in, updates from Julia, an old photo from my mom, an invite from my dad for brunch, if you're ever in town. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. For once, I felt like I had a choice, and that changed everything. By the next summer, word had spread about my lakeside art classes. Parents asked to reserve slots early. A local paper did a feature on my studio space, calling it a creativity hub with heart. Even a retired teacher asked if she could help co-host. My little cottage had become a community anchor. I had built something beautiful, not out of spite, but out of purpose. That August, I rented out my guest room to a solo traveler named Elise. We shared coffee on the porch one morning, and she asked about the house. What made you move here? She asked. I grinned, swirling the last of my latte. It's a long story, I said, and it all started with a text message I was never supposed to see. What I learned was this: being left out hurts, but it also reveals who sees you and who doesn't. And sometimes, being excluded is the best gift you'll ever receive, because it forces you to choose yourself. I stopped chasing a seat at their table and built my own, and now, the view from here is something they'll never fully understand. 2 years later, my parents returned to Lake Crescent for a weekend getaway. This time, they reached out ahead of time. Would you like to have dinner? My mom asked. I hesitated, then said yes. We sat on my porch as the sun dipped low, plates full of grilled salmon and fresh greens, and no drama. No judgment. Just two parents learning how to love their daughter as she really is. I framed my deed and hung it in the hallway. Not as a flex, but as a reminder. It reads, Rachel Hale, owner. Every time I pass it, I smile, not because I proved them wrong, but because I proved myself right. I was enough, just as I am. I always had been. I just needed to stop waiting for others to see it. A few weeks ago, I was sipping coffee on my porch when a young woman from the neighborhood, maybe mid-20s, walked up with hesitant steps. You're Rachel, right? The artist who lives here. I nodded, and she smiled nervously. I just wanted to say, I think it's brave what you did. She didn't need to explain what it was. I invited her to sit, and we talked for hours. She was struggling, left out by her own family after coming out, trying to start over. At one point, she asked, how did you not let it break you? And I told her the truth. It did break me for a while. I cried, I doubted, I isolated. But what saved me wasn't revenge or real estate, it was the quiet decision to stop proving and start living. I gave myself the love I kept waiting to earn. And once I did that, everything else of peace, purpose, even community, followed. You don't need their table when you've built your own. That evening, the lake was calm, like glass. I walked down to the dock with a blanket and a journal. The cottage behind me glowed warm and gold. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one waiting for an invitation, a phone call, an apology. She doesn't live here anymore. Final line, and I don't regret a thing. Every summer, I still wave when they drive past. Sometimes they wave back, sometimes not, but I never expect it. Because I didn't buy the house next door to be near them, I bought it to be closer to myself. And I've never looked back. Over time, my little lake cottage became more than just mine. The workshops turned into seasonal retreats. I started getting emails from women around the country, women who had been excluded, underestimated, or quietly erased by the people they loved. They didn't want revenge stories, they wanted hope. And I had that in abundance. It came in spring. A handwritten letter postmarked from Seattle. It was from Julia, again. Longer this time. She wrote about how therapy had opened her eyes to the ways she'd let jealousy rot the bond we once had. She admitted she used to resent my freedom because she felt trapped in her own life. The last line? You left the family to become who? I wish I had the courage to be. We met for coffee later that month, on neutral ground. The conversation wasn't smooth, it never is when silence has lasted too long, but it was real. She told me about her burnout, about how she envied the life I built, even when she didn't understand it. I listened. And for once, so did she. People talk about forgiveness like it's a gift you hand someone else. It's not. Forgiveness is something you give yourself, so you're not tethered to bitterness. I didn't hug Julia because she said all the right things. I hugged her because I no longer needed her apology to move forward, but I was glad she offered one anyway. One evening in late June, I stood on the dock watching the sun melt into the water. A teen from one of my retreats sat beside me, sketching quietly. I wish I had what you have, she whispered. Your own place. Your own peace. I smiled. You can have it, I told her. Maybe not the house, but the peace? That's yours to build. She looked at me like I'd handed her a map. I still keep a box in my closet. Old birthday cards I never replied to, notes from family that came with stinging undertones, even the first text thread that started it all. I used to read them when I needed fuel for my anger. Now, I keep them as reminders of where I came from, of what I survived, of who I became anyway. Years ago, I thought legacy was about lineage, what family you came from, what name you carried, whose approval you earned. Now, I know better. Legacy is about the lives you touch while being exactly who you are. It's not about the ones who left you out, that it's about the ones who found you because you stood alone. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I heard a knock on the front door. I opened it to find my father, holding a bag of groceries and 2 mugs from the local cafe. He looked older than I remembered. Softer, somehow. Thought maybe we could make pancakes, he said. That we hadn't cooked together in over a decade. I in my kitchen, sun streaming across the old oak counter, my father stirred batter while I chopped strawberries. We didn't talk about the past. Right away. We talked about birds outside the window. About my tomatoes. Then, while flipping a pancake, he said, I don't know why we thought leaving you out would make things easier. For who, I don't even know. That was more than I ever expected to hear. After that day, he came by once a month. Sometimes with tools, sometimes just with questions about the studio. It was like watching someone learn a language they should have spoken all along. He still struggled with emotions, but now, at least, he was trying, and that effort meant more than perfection ever could. One afternoon, he handed me an old photo. It was of me as a kid, paint on my cheeks, standing barefoot in the yard. Your mom keeps this on the fridge, he said. I didn't know that, I replied. Yeah, he said. Neither did I until recently. And just like that, I realized love sometimes hides in silence, until it's ready to speak. When Julia finally visited my art studio, she stood in the doorway for a full minute, looking around. You really built all of this? She asked. With my own 2 hands, I said. She walked to the wall where I hung pieces from each retreat. She lingered on one sketch, a woman, arms wide, alone on a dock. I know this is you, she said softly. Julia took a weekend class. Not because she was an artist, but because she wanted to understand what I found in all this. She made a messy, colorful painting of a woman underwater, breaking the surface. It's me, she said, but I think it's us, too. I saved it, framed it, hung it above my front door. The local college invited me to speak on resilience and creativity. Me, a college dropout turned artist turned studio owner. Standing at that podium, looking out over a room full of young women trying to find their way, I realized something important. I had once begged for a seat at the table. Now, I was building one for others. Dear younger Rachel, they will laugh. They will leave you out. They'll say you're being dramatic. They'll act like it's not personal. But it is personal. And you'll cry. You'll rage. But then you'll rise, and one day, you'll look out across a lake at sunset, and realize you didn't need to be invited, because you, my love, were the main event all along. Love you.